Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today. We have Klondike Gold presenting and CEO Peter Tallman is here with me. Before we get started, a couple of things. So first off, this presentation will contain forward-looking statements. If you don't know what those are, you can check them out on the company's disclosure on their website. And we will be taking Q&A, which you can enter in the Q&A box at the bottom, or if you like, you can email me at deborah@adcat.ca. And with that out of the way, I'd like to introduce Peter Tallman, who's going to tell us a little bit about what Klondike Gold's been up to lately. Hi, Peter.
Hello, Deborah. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Fantastic.
So last time we spoke, I think you were in Dawson, but you're back in Vancouver now?
For the purposes of this webinar, because Dawson really doesn't have the bandwidth to do this. So I thought everybody would appreciate not seeing me pixelated.
All right, well, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and then you can get into the project.
Well, absolutely. So as everyone knows, my name is Peter Tallman. I'm the president and CEO of Klondike Gold. A bit about Klondike Gold itself. We trade on the TSX Venture Exchange under the symbol KG. We trade in Frankfurt under the symbol LBDP, and the US over-the-counter exchange in the symbol KDKGF. Our shareholder base basically is 90% Canadian, but we do have a significant number of Europeans, and the Frankfurt exchange is an active one. Klondike Gold is a member of the Yukon Mining Alliance, so their symbol is down in the bottom right corner of the screen. Yukon Mining Alliance is comprised of developers and explorers who are focused on Yukon territory mineral deposits. So with that, I just want to give a little preamble before I get into the slides. The objective of Klondike Gold for the last 5 years took on the Klondike District property to examine it for gold. The Klondike District has historically produced 20 million ounces of gold from the Klondike Goldfields, from gravels, and up until 2015, the gold is considered all to have been eroded away with no known source. And so Frank Giustra in 2014, Frank Giustra, for those who don't know, he's a mining billionaire. He made his money as CEO of Yorkton Securities, funding juniors specifically, and many of those juniors developed into major producers, and that's where his wealth came from, and for many others as well. Anyway, Frank looked at the Klondike Gold. Klondike Gold originated in 1978, and the Klondike Gold of the past acquired some of the claims that we currently hold beginning in 1980. So he looked at it and said, geez, I think there's potential. He asked me to review the company and the company's potential late in 2014. I did. I said, geez, you know what? There's a whole lot of what I think is great exploration potential, but I don't think the work that's been done there is very good. And so there's an opportunity. And just in general, the easy way to express it is the company's thinking at the time in the past was, hey, the gold is all eroded away and there's nothing left. And just fundamentally, what if they're wrong about that? This would be a gem. And so with that, we constituted, while Frank basically helped take over the company, we reconstituted it and launched it in 2015 to begin exploration. And at the time, there wasn't, as I'm saying, there's no gold known on the Klondike and the bedrock. And here we are today, and I'm presenting you a talk about building gold resources. So this is an exciting time for Klondike because the mineral exploration and discovery phase, which is kind of the exciting part, but that phase is over, and we're transitioning now into more of the business end of it, which is showing that some of these gold discoveries can become mineral resources that are potentially mineable and are worth something. So here we go. As Deborah said, there's forward-looking statements. I'm specifically talking about potential open pit mineralization and and delineation of resources. We do not have any, and these are all conceptual, but that's what we're working towards now. Klondike Gold is operating. Our only property is the Klondike District property, which is located just outside of Dawson in the Yukon in Canada. We have nearly 600 square kilometers of ground contiguous, which covers the entirety of the historic Klondike Goldfields, located just outside of Dawson. Our management, just as a bit of background, I'm a professional geo. I've been doing this for a long time. I've had 3 mineral discoveries from grassroots, so about the same scale as where I took Klondike Gold over. 2 of those have become mines. The 3rd is a deposit waiting to be a mine. For a time, I worked for Noranda. I've worked for 2 majors. The last one was Noranda. For a time, I worked with Ian Perry, who's my VP Exploration. He was my boss there. He went on and worked internationally with Noranda and has a great track record also of exploration through development. Laterally, he was working with a mining engineering team developing oil sands deposits, so open pit, and that experience also is very useful to what we're considering now. Jasvir Claudy is an amazing woman who has an immense experience with takeovers, mergers, and basically has a great financial background. Also, she's working for Fiore Management, or seconded from them. Fiore Management is Frank Justra's corporate management consulting company now, and that he founded after Yorkton Securities. Gord Keep is the chairman of the board, also a Fiore, he's now the CEO of Fiore Management, and immense resource again in financial affairs and also how to run junior and mid-tier companies. Tara Christie is a Yukoner first, president and CEO of Banyan, which is a gold explorer focused in the Yukon. Also wife of John McConnell, who is the CEO of Victoria Gold, which is Canada's newest gold mine, also in the Yukon. And basically she provides a wealth of Yukon-centric knowledge, experience, and contacts. And the last 2, Steve Burnell and John Pallett, are 2 guys who individually have had companies make mineral discoveries, and in each case take them to fruition where they developed mine plans and were ultimately sold to bigger companies. The initial objective, I've said, for Klondike Gold for our exploration affairs is to find 2 million ounces or better and perhaps sell it to a major, or at least look for a major partner. And so actually just go back to that slide. This group of people is really custom built from a board and management perspective to do exactly that. Our capital structure, the top right, Frank Justra directly owns 14% of all the shares. Eric Sprott is another mining billionaire, owns just less than Frank, somewhere around 13%. Insiders, which is basically our officers and directors, own 11%. I personally own 5% of the company. And so I personally am invested in the success of it. Key investors are basically 10. One of those key investors is Tara Christie's family, so not her individually, but her dad. So she's a multi-generational miner in the Yukon, and her dad came to the Yukon in 1975 to find the source of the Klondike gold and discovered that it was far easier to mine the gravels, and that the family accumulated wealth that way. But in the meantime, he managed to stake the quartz claims to nearly 40% of the Klondike district. And one of the first things I did when I became CEO of Klondike was do a deal with him where we, Klondike Gold, acquired the district claims that we didn't already own and combined the 2. So a couple of things there. Number one, it's the first time ever that the Klondike district claims have all been in one exploration or one ownership. And number 2, we have the support of a multi-generational mining family in the Yukon that basically brings a wealth of knowledge in their own right. So current price is 32 cents. Our market cap is $35 million. We have in the bottom right, we had a set budget of $1 million to begin 2020. That has an asterisk with it because that was set during COVID times, and really in beginning of March, early April, we didn't know that we could actually work in Yukon at all, particularly given COVID constraints. And so Klondike Gold developed an exploration strategy, executed it, and we were the first in the field for anyone in Yukon, and we were the first to drill and the first to complete drilling. And that was all really a walk in the wild side, because it was not until we demonstrated that it could be done and that we could protect primarily our First Nation host community, which is in Dawson, also our contractors, also our own employees, from the risk of infection from COVID. Nobody had done it, and we had to invent a whole pile of protocols that would work. So that was a small budget with the expectation that we'd be able to do something. If we proved we could do it, then we would come back and have a later program in the fall. And that's coming up. We're absolutely prepared and ready to go drilling this month, a little later on. So cash on hand is a little light, but that's today's cash balance, 0.8 million. One of the things I'll point out that shareholders generally get nervous about is looking at the warrants and what you would regard as a warrant overhang. The history of Klondike Gold under my leadership has been basically approaching individuals, wealthy individuals, primarily who have funded the last 6 years of exploration. And those are all friendly to the company. And those warrants I've used as a tool for financing. I can phone pretty much all the people who own, like 100% of those warrants. I know who owns them. They're friendly to the company. I can phone and ask them to exercise it, not necessarily at the end of the term, but hey, say now when the company needs money. And that's been an amazingly useful help in terms of managing the financial affairs of Klondike Gold. So we have supportive shareholders. We are at the stage now, we've done all the exploration, so the shareholders have all been individuals financing the dream of exploration. And we're now transitioning into development where we can begin to attract basically funds and more of the professional money managers, or be of interest to them anyway. The potential here for the Yukon as a jurisdiction from a governance perspective, the Yukon government is fully supportive of mining financially and from a regulatory point of view, and Yukon is one of the best regulatory jurisdictions in the world to operate in. From a potential for mineral exploration, is the Klondike is within the Tintina Gold Belt. The Tintina Gold Belt is one of the most gold prolific regions in the world. Begins in Russia, comes across Alaska, cuts through Yukon and down into British Columbia, and a correlative of it is the California Mother Lode Belt in California. In the Yukon, our neighbors are as I said, Victoria Gold, the Eagle Mine, Canada's newest mine, is just 100 odd kilometers to the east. Brewery Creek, which was a mine in the 80s and is now being restarted, is about 75 kilometers up the highway from us. Golden Saddle, which kicked off the Yukon discovery phase in about 14 years ago. That was by Underworld, a little junior that was bought by Kinross, is directly south. And the Kaminak discovery of the Coffee deposit is also directly south. Road access to Golden Saddle and Coffee goes directly through the middle of our Klondike property. And then we have Pogo, which is the big world-class orogenic gold deposit just across the border in Alaska. And so we are surrounded by effectively really good deposits of size. I'm going to point out the checkerboard thing. The orogenic gold deposits in the Tintina Gold Belt have two structures or two distant. So it's a cross fault. There's two different structures. One of those directions is feeding gold into the host rocks, and the other is where the gold is deposited. So as you go down through this presentation, you're going to see that checkerboard because it occurs. It's a comfort to me. You can see the regional pattern that controls all the gold reflected within the Klondike right on the local level. And so the package, we have, hang on, I'm going to just move that. So our property in blue-gray, nearly 600 square kilometers. I'm going to focus on that yellow box in a minute. But the goldy colors are creeks from which 20 million ounces of gold have been extracted since 1896. It is the largest unexplained gold geochemical anomaly on the planet, which we have now explained over the last couple of years with the work that we've done from 2015 to the present. And that work has documented multiple sources of gold in that and within our claims. What we're doing now is taking several of those and have begun resource delineation. And that's the box that I'm going to focus on. So really the last 5 years of exploration has been there were three objectives coming in. The first was to document there actually was gold in the ground here, because before 2015, everyone thought it had all been eroded away and there was none. And then the second objective was to find potentially economic grade over potentially mineable width anywhere, just once, just to prove that yes, there was really something here that maybe could be mineable. And then lastly, to find a zone that had a 2 million ounce potential in size if cows flew and all the exploration really worked out. Was there something that could be of interest to a major? And really, if it was smaller than that, we weren't really going to be interested in it because it's too small. You know, it's nice, but 2 million ounces and up is what majors want, and that's what we're aiming for here, is something where we can either partner with a major or have them take us out. So the first phase of exploration, one of the first holes we drilled, hit 76 grams over 2.8 meters in 2015. We really haven't gone back to that. That's on the El Dorado fault. Another hole in 2015, of which, and we only drilled 19, we hit 5.3 grams over 7.6 meters. That's on the standard zone as we know it now. And that was really the eye-opener of, you know what, there's a whole lot of gold here. There's economically interesting mineralization pretty much everywhere. And this property is dramatically unexplored, not really underexplored, it's unexplored. So there's our work summary over the last 5 years, leading up to 2019. 1,000 grams gold and 1,000 grams silver over a meter in the standard zone was one of the best holes drilled in the world at that point. Sadly, it was only second or third best in Canada because the Cisco at Windfall Lake had a better one. But the compendium of that left, what we identified in that exploration and through exploration, the regional exploration through the district, were two styles of mineralization. One is gold, coarse, nuggety, cloddy gold, unevenly distributed in quartz veining. And then a second that is, there are quartz veins, but primarily it's a disseminated zone within a major thrust fault at Lone Star. And so I'm going to show you examples of the Lone Star effectively disseminated zone, and then the standard zone, which is the high-grade quartz vein. And what we're doing in 2020 right now is beginning resource delineation on both of those zones. Which here's the map of the main focus of our exploration and now delineation. And so in 2015, when I started, this map was blank. There was no gold on it, and it was considered to be dead from an exploration point of view. So in 5 years, we've done a lot of work and documented an immense amount of gold with great potential for more. what we see in terms of faulting is 4 different faults. The Bonanza Fault, Nugget Fault, Eldorado Fault, and Irish Fault are all potentially deep crustal structures, and they are focusing gold-bearing fluids. So on the Bonanza Fault is the Lone Star Zone, which is a broad zone between 30 and 100 meters wide of gold mineralization at surface. The Standard Zone is quartz veins, so we tend to get cloddy visible golds, but again, it's a zone that, depending on, it's a vein array, so we can have narrow veins focused in a 10-meter interval, so the 10 grams over 10 meters, or series of more broadly spaced veins, so we get things like 2 grams over 45 meters. Again, quartz veining and little cloddy gold. And then the Eldorado Fault and the Irish Fault, we don't know much about, but we think they have potential as well. At Lone Star and Standard Zone, we've traced gold mineralization in each of them for over 5 kilometers. To put that in perspective, we're targeting a 2 million ounce gold discovery, or a 2 million ounce gold resource. And to put a resource area, the Lone Star Zone in its own right could host well over that from the area that we know to be gold mineralized. The Standard Zone equally so. And so just in this small little subset of our property, we see the potential to exceed our 2 million ounce threshold. And for that to happen, that's a forward-looking statement. We need exploration to be successful, but geez, we've seen a lot of gold mineralization, and we've had a lot of success drilling holes. In general, the Lone Star Zone is low grade or lower grade and extends over a broad width. And I'm going to show you sections here in a second, whereas the Standard Zone is more concentrated in veins and tends to be narrower. So within the two, there's 2 boxes, yellow dashed lines. Those are subsections of where we are drilling now for delineation drilling on each of them for resources. And then the third thing I'm going to show you is that dashed circle in the bottom right, and that is the Standard Zone, which is a major fault, where it intersects one of these secondary faults, which is a checkerboard pattern. And I'm going to show you some really nice gold there. So first up, Lone Star, phase 1 drilling. We just completed it. This was a pre-drill map of what we were going to set to achieve, remembering that this is COVID when we planned this. So we selected this area to do delineation drilling because it was easy and flat and simple, and we didn't really have to worry about much of the logistics, which was what's complicating the exploration effort when we started. So this drill, where we were drilling, is more convenient than anything else. And you see, so on the left-hand side, 2 grams over 40 meters, 1.5 grams over 65. We do get zones of high grade within it. And actually soon you're going to start seeing more of the higher grade subintervals discussed because we're finding that they have continuity. But the model target here is looking at a potentially open pitable resource. All this gold sits at surface. We can dig it up with a backhoe. It has very good potential for becoming something that has positive economics. We have a lot of work to do on it yet. And all the deep potential remains here. So in section, I stole this from our pre-drill summary, and it was in our presentation last week, was our dream for what we were going to hit as a conceptual starter open pit. And I just put the drill results that we announced yesterday, the day before, in where we thought what was the proposal for what we thought we were going to hit. And it matches just wonderfully well. What it shows, though, is something that you're not going to get out of reading the news release, is 2 things. Number one, we were really only drilling the forward area, the part of the left-hand side of what we think might be an open pit. And hole 346 on this slide That was a surprise to us. We didn't think there was mineralization up in that top left corner, and that just makes it better again, because any mineralization up in that, we thought it was dead, any mineralization up there means that the potential open pit geometry just looks better. So on the right-hand side, it's blank, and obviously we have work to do on that section because we have to follow the mineralization across. Again, the COVID, what we were trying to do was what was simple, easy, cheap, and quick. And so we're coming back to this later. In general, though, I'm really pleased to see that, because that just really helps shape what we're about to do in the future and kind of validates the idea that delineation of mineral resources is going to be, at least in some ways, successful. Then we move down to the standard zone. That's phase 2 drilling. We drilled those orange dots. One of the things I should point out in both of these things is that we have to drill misses to find out where the edges are. This is resource delineation drilling. It's not exploration where you try to hit all the time. And so these dots are placed so that, yes, we're going to hit mineralization, but we are also going to hit edges. These assays are pending and they should be out shortly. Lastly, and this is where the circle, the yellow circle was, is in Upper El Dorado Creek. Those nuggets were found now 5 or 6 days ago, and that's subcrop in the creek, in the bank of the creek. Those nuggets are absolutely pristine. I call your attention to the one in the lowest part. We're now calling that the butterfly nugget. And that did not travel anywhere. Had it moved 10 feet, it would have broken apart. It's only held together by a little bit of gold as glue. That's really promising because it sits in a structure. We've hand dug it. We're still trying to get an excavator in to trench it. There'll be more results probably towards the end of the summer on that. But we know that that's where the target there is, where the standard zone crosses one of these secondary structures that is pumping gold into the Klondike. And so we're really encouraged to see coarse nuggets like that. So basically, I've just given you an overview, God forbid, a long one, of the exploration potential and what we're trying to do to advance this towards a money stage. One of the biggest economic advantages, or one of the biggest advantages this project has, is the economics of infrastructure. And so we're based in Dawson. We drive on a government-maintained road, partially paved to the claims. And so starting at the bottom right, that's Dawson. The Yukon River is flowing kind of up and down, and the Klondike River flows to the left. In the upper left-hand corner, that basically the road goes around, that's the Klondike Highway. That goes to Whitehorse and to points south all the way to Vancouver. There's a paved airport there. The government paved it last year, so now 737s comfortably land. They're looking into scheduled 737 service direct to Vancouver starting next year, which would be great. All of this, it's a mining community, so there's heavy infrastructure, the government maintained roads, power, the substation is in Dawson, and we have excellent access. The drillers get up in the morning, drive to the gas station, fill the truck and tanks with the fuel they need for the day, and are at the drill within 30 minutes. Contrast that with the Kaminak preliminary economic assessment. So the Kaminak coffee deposit has a lot of similarities with what we see in the Klondike, but they costed a $750 million bill for capital costs to build road and power line to the project. Ultimately, they've changed that, but our project has very little. I don't think it'll be very high, and so that $750 million benefit to us. The economics here make a really big difference. And so in summary, I hope you saw that there is multi-million ounce gold potential. We've changed from discovery phase really to resource delineation that's going to lead to a mineral resource potentially in 2 years, but I'm going to say officially 3, just to be within it. One of the things we can effectively explore, and we are an effective explorer in Yukon. We were the first mover this year, and now we're beginning to deliver news into a fantastic accelerating gold market in general. And we have finally an infrastructure advantage that is worth an enormous amount for us potentially looking at economics down the way. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Deborah, and maybe somebody has questions.
I think that was a really good overview. I've got a question for you. So how come nobody previously found anything on this land package? Can you explain that? I think that's the question the market would like to know.
It's one that Frank Justra wanted to know as well, to be honest. And that's, I said when I took this project on, one of the things that we're going to have to do is convince the world. The world must think we're nuts, because everybody has known about the Klondike since 1896. And to come in and tell them it's unexplored, nobody's going to believe it. But it is. So 1896 up through to when the world went off the gold standard in the 1960s, the project was basically controlled by placer rights and ultimately became a Yukon Consolidated Gold Company that were focused on placer only and really didn't want to have anything to do with hard rock exploration, even though they had control of it. And thinking about that, though, the gold standard, the gold price was pegged. So it started in 1896 and it really didn't change until 1962. The economics, though, did, because inflation, being what it is, made it harder and harder for the Yukon Consolidated Gold Company to make any money, and that meant they cut exploration first. They didn't do any. So the next phase exploration was done in the 60s, and that one, I said to Frank Justra when I reviewed it, that was the best one. The best phase exploration ever done in here was done then, because they found a whole pile of stuff, but again, pre-removal of gold price, so gold was fixed. And what they needed were really high grades, and they didn't see it. So the following phase was when Klondike Gold staked it, and Klondike Gold was created in 1978 and run by a prospector. He staked the original claims in 1980, and in 1984 he was the co-discoverer of Hemlo. He was paid an immense amount in royalty payments in 1984, became instantly wealthy, and then went off and did a whole pile of unfocused things, none of which involved the Klondike. And so there ended up being 3 phases of management of the Klondike that really didn't do anything. And so part of that was they come every 4 years and scratch around, not find anything. And from that came the idea that, geez, we didn't find anything really. There's nothing here to find. It's all eroded away. And when I reviewed it and went, you know what? So it's shocking in Canada. This is one of the best discoveries done from 100 odd years ago. And there wasn't a geology map of the district. Nobody even knew what the rock types were. They were called undivided. It's just this higgledy-piggledy stuff. We don't know what's there. And so part of my deal with Frank was he had to fund those basic geoscience surveys that have never been done just to see what we were facing. And so that's the story. It's not, I find it still shocking in Canada that the Klondike discovery of gold and 20 million ounces sitting in the creek gravels didn't attract somebody who did systematic exploration of the bedrock until we did it. And that's how it was pretty easy to locate gold. Everywhere we look, we find gold. So it just wasn't done.
Okay. And I have a couple questions just around the timeline and your goal with the resource. I know you touched on that, but maybe you can reiterate when you expect to put out some sort of resource, what you're targeting, and I've got some follow-on questions as well.
I don't really want to be pinned down because I don't know when we're going to have a resource. I suspect, based on past experience, that what we need is about 100,000 meters of drilling to produce a resource that is going to pass muster to my target audience, which is majors. And so that's the best possible resource that needs the most drilling. And so we'll see. I could do faster for less drilling, and it would be less more, I'd say poorly constrained, but might be okay, at least as a taster. But generally, what we're targeting is at least 2 million ounces, because that's the threshold at which majors would be interested. And that doesn't mean we would stop at 2 million. This belt, I think, has much, much, much more than that. But at least to make everybody happy and give the institutions comfort that there is something of size here, that's what we're aiming at.
Okay. And so just to answer this question explicitly, so the reason that you're not aiming to put out a resource in the near term is that you want to ensure that you get over that 2 million threshold.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're not there yet. We've started, and so we have cloud mineralization, again, poorly constrained. That's why we're starting that's from exploration drilling. And now we're doing delineation for resource drilling, and that's a different kettle of fish. Again, you need to drill edges, and so far we haven't found any edges. And we need to be able to constrain things and put a geometry for economics on it too.
And how many meters of drilling have you done on the property to date?
50,000.
50,000. And to date, your exploration drilling has been shallow. Are there indications that gold-bearing structures go deeper than has been tested to date?
Everything is shallow. And again, as a kind of a story, Frank Juster has been pushing me to drill 600-meter holes in this project since I took it over in 2015. And I said, why would I do that? All the gold is sitting at surface, so we won't worry about it. But yes, it's an orogenic gold model. And so we have disseminated gold at surface, and basically those are pumped, the gold is pumped up along structures, and we think that the gold, as you go to depth, will become more focused like it is at Pogo. And so there is opportunity for high grade, narrow underground potential. And absolutely, we are looking at deeper drilling now. But the initial premise was we're junior, we're poor with a small market cap. Blowing our brains out drilling random deep holes would have been off-putting, to put it mildly. I think we've developed a resume of look at like the hundreds of holes that have hit now. And we're prepared to take a few shots to see if our exploration model is correct on a detail level.
Okay. And would you define what an orogenic gold system is for those who may not be familiar with that terminology?
Yeah. Orogenic gold is gold that is fault related, and typically crustal fault related, where gold bearing fluids are pushed from the lower crust up to surface along fluid conduits and accumulate at surface, typically in veins and faults. And so in our case, the model for the Klondike when we arrived was, yes, it was an orogenic gold model, but there was no evidence of it from the ground. And so I liked it on the desktop review. In fact, I identified a great big fault that no one had ever looked at or identified previously and said, if it's orogenic, then that must be the fault that controls it all. Let's go look. And it turned out that that's the case. And so now we've identified the host fault which is where the gold is ending up, but also the plumbing system that pumped the gold into the fault. So there you go, orogenic gold deposits in a quick, faulty kind of explanation.
Perfect. Thank you for that. So moving on to some of the seasonality at play, I have one question about drilling. Since there's still daylight out in the Yukon, will Klondike Gold do further drilling on its property this summer? And if so, can you reiterate your plans around that?
Oh, in general, every year is a race because it's cold in March. And we usually get into the field in early mid-April at lower elevations, so down on Eldorado Creek and Bonanza Creek. And then as the snows and ice recedes, we can get up onto the ridge crests. And so you'll see a geographic area of drilling. We'll start at the bottom, move our way up to the top, like at Lone Star. And then at the end of the year, we start pulling the drills back down. So we drill stuff lower like Stander. And then potentially the last holes we drill would be on Eldorado Creek right at the bottom. It's a race every year. We get 24 hours of daylight nearly the entire time we're there. So 3.5 months of 24 hours a day daylight. We work 24 hours a day in shifts. And so I'd like to think of it that basically if we were somewhere else working 12 hours a day, we get pretty much the same amount of work done. We try not to lose a day or even an hour. And so anyway, from drilling perspective, we usually start, as we did this year, at the end of April. End of mid-May, somewhere like that. We can begin in the end of April. And we can drill easily into mid-late October, at which point we're logging core when it's really cold and the rocks, or the drill core tends to freeze, so it gets to be problematic. There are ways to extend the season that are costly. Kaminag did them. You build heated water bladders and do a lot of site preparation on drill pads, so you can operate year-round if you had to.
Okay, so your drilling season sort of April to October, and then your news flows May to November-ish?
June to November and into the new year, actually.
So one of the things that I've noticed about some of the Yukon equities, exploration companies, is the seasonality in the share price. Oftentimes the share price falling in the second half of the year, which I assume is just correlating with news flow. So we have a question about that. Do you think this seasonal pattern repeats itself this year, or are there good reasons that this year will be anomalous?
The seasonality, and certainly in our share price for the last 5 years, is very predictable. I have tried in previous years to mitigate it by doing various things, and really it hasn't worked. This year, of any, I suspect that the market will mitigate it for me to some degree, and there's 2 reasons for that. Number one, the gold price, and everybody is searching the world for gold equities that have potential. Number 2 is we have transitioned from exploration into delineation. And so what we're trying to demonstrate to the world, and I'm trying to do this with this presentation, is that we have gold resources coming, but they could be substantial. And so having people, from an investment point of view, I'm trying to attract longer term equities, funds, bigger players, versus up until now our shareholders have it's always been marketing has been aimed at individuals who absolutely would take advantage of the seasonality.
Okay. And I had one question on metallurgical studies. Have you done any gold recovery studies? Can you speak to these results?
Yes, we've done 2 tests, gravity recoverable gold tests. That was done 2 years ago, I think, initially to satisfy me. Again, if it's refractory, then it's useless and we should just not do it. Both gold tests came back positive. Both they're both two big samples from Lone Star with 90 and 90, over 90%, so 92% gold, gravity recoverable, and that's all we did. So I haven't tested it for cyanide. It was just the gold itself. Empirically, there's been 20 million ounces of gold mined from the Klondike and recovered by sluices, so water and gravity. And we found the sources of all that, and should be no surprise to anybody. Guess what? It's all recoverable by gravity. So no more advanced than that, but we're looking at doing some more overtly and roll some test work in this fall and into next year.
Okay. And then I had some questions on your strategy. Would you like to take this to production? Do you expect to be taken over? Do you want to JV it? Will you keep the land package together? Will you option parts of it out? How do you think about your overall strategy?
Well, just stepping back as an investor, I really dislike investing in an exploration company where the CEO, who's an explorationist, tells me that he's going to go mine it, because at that point there's the opportunity to make every rookie mistake mining it. That, you know, it used to be technical teams did it. In talking with some people recently, though, I realized that is that's an old perspective from the days gone by, when major mining companies had teams of engineers who have made all the mistakes, and therefore you always wanted to sell to a major because they would develop it properly. These days, the majors have all laid off their mining engineers who are out consulting. And so, as an example, Victoria Gold, John McConnell, who's not a mining guy, well, he's whatever, he basically hired the expertise to build that mine, and he's done a great job with it. And that's a way to do it. So to answer the question directly, we were aiming at selling eventually to majors once we got as big a resource as we possibly could. But I think there's an opportunity definitely to expand. There's a long run here of exploration where we're going to be identifying mineral resources probably well after I'm dead on the property. And what I want to see is an initial mine, and I'm thinking more about building the team that could do it internally than basically, and then for that, what we would need is partners from majors rather than outright takeover. Who knows, really?
So you're open to maximizing value as long as
absolutely. That really is the fundamental aim here, yes.
Okay. And I can tell that your shareholders have a similar sense of humor to you. Apparently you've attracted like-minded people. I've got a couple jokes. I don't know if I should say them.
Uh-oh.
You had one question. Have you found any nuggets in Anton Standard's fireplace yet? I don't know who that is, but I assume you do.
I do. So then that's Anton Stander gets absolutely no credit, but he discovered gold on Eldorado Creek 2 weeks after the original discovery on Bonanza Creek. Okay. Eldorado Creek, ultimately, there's been 4 million ounces mined off Eldorado Creek. Anton was the guy who basically made it happen. And again, Parks Canada have made a big thing about other things. Anyway, we found Anton Stander's original cabin, and what's left of it is his fireplace, and it's full of cracks. And I imagine, I mean, there's he had hundreds of thousands of ounces pass through that cabin. And I imagine that, he'd want to keep some of it safe. Stuffed in the fireplace would be the obvious place. So every time I go in there, I try to stuff my arm down another crack to see if I can find a nugget. I haven't done that yet, but basically, if you come on a tour, I always take everyone to the Anton Stander's cabin, and we all kind of try to poke at that fireplace.
That's hilarious.
Well, and I don't know if you can see. I mean, this is the kind of thing that we're looking at. You know, that's what I'm hoping to find. in his fireplace. Well, I'm hoping to find it on the ground too, but it'd be fun to find something.
Backup plan.
Yeah.
And then another one of our participants would like you to get Brent Cook on camera eating his hat, if possible.
Brent is never going to eat his hat. That one comes from, I was the CEO for a couple of months at PDAC in 2015, and Brent Cook came along and ambushed me on camera and said, "Peter, what are you doing?" And I went, "Whoa, hey, hi, Brent. Like, I'm doing Klondike Gold." And he went, "Oh, I've been there. There's nothing there." And I went, "But wait, Brent, here we go." So there's a great video of, if Brent ends it with, "Well, that was Peter Tallman, and he's, he sounds like he's on to something, but I'm skeptical." Which is Brent. If you know Brent Cook, he's never not skeptical. So that was, I figured I fought him to a standstill, and I was happy with that. But that interview is still doing the rounds as the takedown and as a battle. And so it amuses people. It's kind of amusing in a way. Yeah.
Maybe I could pick up some tips. I think I'm too nice around here at Adelaide Capital,
I appreciate it.
Okay, so two more things. So first, I think we have to address the woolly mammoth in the room, which is, are you planning on doing a financing in the near term? I know you can't come out right out and say it, but maybe you can give us some ideas around that. Or do you have some warrant money coming in? Potentially?
We have warrant money coming in. We also have a royalty on gold production from our placer claims coming in. And I would say that junior explorers are always looking for money because money is oxygen to us as a class. And so if somebody wants to offer me money, you would hope I would take it if the terms were reasonable. Otherwise, come and smack me upside the head, because that's it. We are always looking for money.
Got it. Okay. And then the last question, usually we don't put the CEOs on the spot to answer a macro question, but
oh, good.
I like the participant that wrote it, so we're going to go for it. So Peter, be brave and give us your outlook on the price of gold. You've been through a few cycles. What do you think?
Yes, I've been through a few cycles. I am convinced that gold is going higher, and at 2,000 an ounce US, I think the dollar drops in value, and the response to that is gold goes up and becomes far more desirable than it is today. And price-wise, I kind of regard that as bad because the world needs a reserve currency, but I'm thinking that there are some doubts about the US dollar and how much debt they're printing, and not that that's not going to be the reserve currency, but people are going to look for some alternatives, and gold is one of those for sure.
Okay. And unsurprisingly, I lied to you, Peter. There are no questions. I just missed the chat. I got one job. I have one job. I can't even do it. Okay, let's go through. You got one on First Nations royalties. Can you explain the involvement?
At the moment, we don't have a defined benefits agreement with the tribe, so we only have one that I would worry, like the Klondike First Nation. We're on Klondike Witchin First Nation territory. They're based in Dawson. Talk to them all the time. Have done since the start a lot of remediation and have offered to do whatever was required to help remediate things that were relic from the 1896 gold rush even, and clean places up. So we have a good working relationship. We don't hit the threshold for involvement to have a defined benefits agreement yet, but that's coming soon. And they want some royalty, which typically is, well, it's pretty low. It's like an NSR. And what they also want is our employment benefits, and training opportunities. And we already provide those. We hire every kid, 15, 16-year-old. We've been doing that for 4 or 5 years now. And we now have a cadre of locals who are trained, and I've told the chief of the Klondikes that what I'm doing is training their future mining division, and that they're going to have their own group in-house who can evaluate what we're doing. So I think that answered the question. We don't have it yet, but we have a good relationship. They're going to negotiate hard, as they did with Kaminak, as they did with Brewery Creek. And that's the way of it, but they are amenable to mining in the territory.
Okay. And then I had a question on drilling cost per meter and whether lower oil prices have benefited you in that regard.
Our exploration costs, our unit costs are some of the lowest in Canada. Forget about the lowest in Yukon. Because we're on a road, on power, on everything. And so the infrastructure advantage is very good. Our drilling anyway, so it's some of the lowest anyway. What I do is I've calculated our all-in cost for acquiring the company, buying paper clips and everything else. And so for the 50,000 meters of drilling, we're a little under like $350 per meter drilled, which we did regional exploration, we did district scale stuff, everything, paper clips, all the expenses that have been associated with the acquisition of the company, including paying $2 million in debts previous suppliers. So our stuff is pretty cheap, and definitely the cheapest in Yukon.
Okay. And last question, I hope, that we can stay for a bit longer.
The more the merrier. I don't mind. It's easier to answer questions. I'm great with that.
Do you currently have any broker coverage, or is that something you're working on?
Yes, in Germany, First Berlin. So they cover us. Nobody in Canada. Again, we've been an discovery exploration company, which basically, as you know, brokers don't cover that story from an analyst point of view. Yeah. We're transitioning into resources, and so I've already had some discussions with, in particular, 2 different brokerages about that. And as we go along, at least we're getting interest in looking at it, and we'll see.
Okay, and I think that's a wrap. Is there any other points or comments you'd like us to take away, Peter?
I think just in general, the Klondike itself offers an enormous potential for large volumes of gold to be discovered and ultimately mined. What we have to do now is actually prove the concept that we know that there's a lot of gold there. What we are working on now is the concept of economics and whether any of it is extractable at a profit. But we've gone past that discovery stage and all the questions. There is a lot of gold there. And so now let's show the world that we can extract it profitably.
Okay. Great. Well, I think that wraps things up. Thank you very much for taking the time to walk us through the presentation and answer all the questions. Exciting times in that area, and I look forward to seeing some more of your results.
Thank you very much, Deborah. I enjoyed it. I really liked the opportunity. I appreciated the question about Anton Stander's fireplace. And I look forward to doing this again sometime.
Okay, perfect. Well, have a great afternoon, and thank you everyone for participating. I will make this available as a replay in the next day or so. So check it out on our YouTube channel. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you.